and I was the first president to have a BlackBerry. And so years pass, and no one else has BlackBerry.
In the early 2000s, owning a BlackBerry was many people's dream. The modern cell phone with a wide keyboard that could send emails dominated the market and seemed far from being reached by any other model. At the time, BlackBerry was already the biggest phone brand on the planet and one of the fastest growing companies in the market. 18 years might not seem like a long time, but looking back to around 2005, it feels like we were living in a parallel reality. To give you an idea, BlackBerry's biggest competitors at the time were Nokia and Motorola. The V3 and the N70 were some of the devices that went head-to-head with the super email sending machine. The three of them dominated the market, but today they are hardly mentioned. Well, maybe Motorola a little bit, but the fact is now the market is essentially Samsung or Apple. According to Statista, in 2011, BlackBerry's revenue reached its peak, hitting $19.9 billion. 10 years later, in 2021, the number didn't even reach 900 million. So, what happened to BlackBerry? What are they doing today? And also, is there any chance for BlackBerry to return to its early 2000s glory? BlackBerry was one of the first companies to start it all. The company was founded in 1984 and was initially called Research in Motion, or simply RIM. Initially, RIM acquired a series of patents in the technology area, created push email, and gathered various talented developers who elevated the brand. At the time, the company worked with technologies such as modems and pagers. In 2000, RIM launched its first cell phone, the BlackBerry 957. The cell phone had excellent encryption, was secure, had email, a great messaging system, and internet access. It didn't take long to become the market's favorite, especially among corporate professionals, as they could do everything they already did on a computer, but now without the need to sit in front of screens. It's worth remembering here that BlackBerry was much more corporate than for the average user. Although ordinary people began to use the cell phone in their daily lives, the brand didn't pay much attention to this type of audience. But regardless of the target audience, everyone wanted to have one because those who had it were seen as important. Only well-off people with a good job that required constant updates had a BlackBerry. The brand was also the first to popularize the QWERTY keyboard on cell phones, which served for a long time as its sales flag. BlackBerry knew what the customer wanted and used it to its advantage. They knew that people would like to be able to answer their emails outside the office and that a wide keyboard would be convenient for that. And thinking about how its users liked and needed constant contact with others without having to worry about credits, they created the BlackBerry Messenger, another big booster for the brand's cell phones. The functionality allowed users to exchange unlimited messages, but only for BlackBerry owners. Later, this functionality became an app for iOS and Android, but was swallowed by heavy competition. In addition to everything, the device also had a simple design and was easy to use. It was with BlackBerry that cell phone addiction began. People spent all their time glued to the screens, constantly updating and responding to their emails. The cell phone that had been launched promising more convenience and freedom to professionals ended up making them even busier, even in their free time. BlackBerry owners were always connected. Nowadays, it's no surprise, but at the time, cell phones were basically used for SMS and calls and weren't basically a Swiss Army knife like today. The addiction was such that in the United States, the device came to be called Crackberry, referencing crack and the dependency it causes. But this was not a problem. On the contrary, year after year, BlackBerry released cell phones with more features and better technology. The fact that celebrities like Kim Kardashian and the then US President Barack Obama used the brand also turned out to be a big booster. It was a cell phone for everyone. Competitors also offered the email function, but none invested in it as much as BlackBerry. It came equipped with the famous physical keyboard, had an exclusive messaging service that only brand users could enjoy, and was secured to the point of being chosen by the White House. In 2009, BlackBerry was considered the fastest growing company in the world by Fortune magazine. Apple occupied the 39th place on the list. At that time, BlackBerry's share of the American smartphone market was 56%. BlackBerry was soaring, giant, dominating the market. It never crossed its mind that it could be overtaken. And this was its first big mistake. Apple made its entrance quietly. In 2007, when the first iPhone was launched, BlackBerry didn't take it seriously. The iPhone was expensive and lacked a physical keyboard. A phone without a physical keyboard? Madness. That's what the company was thinking. But Apple was ready to dominate the sector and did so gradually. That's when BlackBerry made a fatal mistake, somewhat egocentric one might say, believing users would never abandon physical keyboards and decided to see what would happen. BlackBerry's two major failures were underestimating the competitors and failing to see the change in consumer behavior. The market evolved and people's tastes changed, but BlackBerry remained the same, betting on the same old formula and believing that the physical keyboard and its email functionality would hold the company up for a long time. Apple didn't just make any phone without a keyboard and throw it into the market. It built an entire ecosystem around the iPhone. BlackBerry tried to compete, but was slow and had a disastrous evolution. Trying to compete with Apple's touchscreen in 2008, BlackBerry launched the BlackBerry Storm, but the phone received numerous negative reviews. People criticized the device's touchscreen, the lack of Wi-Fi connection, and even the behavior of the virtual keyboard. In 2009, the company launched Storm 2, but the public reaction wasn't much different. Still, BlackBerries continued to sell. First because the iPhone was still very expensive and also because Apple had an exclusivity contract with AT&T that lasted until 2011. So people that didn't want to switch phone companies or pay more stayed with what they had. Plus, people also showed some resistance to swapping their phone for one without a physical keyboard. But the problems to BlackBerry were just beginning. The brand, beloved by corporations, failed to foresee that ordinary people would be the future of smartphones instead of large corporations. And email isn't the only interest of the average user. In 2008, Apple launched the App Store and the second-generation iPhone 3G, with supported mobile apps. The App Store was the game changer here. Of course, BlackBerry followed suit, but their App Store only arrived a year later. Meanwhile, Apple convinced users that the phone wasn't just for work. Having apps and games was cooler than having just email and security. By 2010, BlackBerry's App World hosted about 17,000 apps, while the App Store already had over 150,000. Steve Jobs hit the nail on the head, and BlackBerry couldn't keep up. In 2007, Apple sold just over 1 million phones. By 2011, that number had reached 72 million, and in 2015, it peaked at 231 million sales, according to Statista. During the same period, after peaking at more than 52 million sales in 2011, BlackBerry practically went back to what it was in 2007, with less than 10 million devices sold, according to Business Insider. Google also played a significant role in BlackBerry's decline. Google bought Android in 2005 and everything changed from there. Over the years, technology evolved, and brands like Samsung and LG were some of the ones that took advantage of Google's operating system. So there was no excuse. If the iPhone was too expensive, just buy an Android. After all, who would want a phone with buttons and limited apps when you could have an Android or an iPhone? Over time, Apple and Google made BlackBerry obsolete. It was a real free fall. According to Business Insider, from 2009 to 2016, BlackBerry's market share fell from 20% to 0.1%. In 2016, the company announced it would no longer manufacture its hardware. Instead, it would outsource production. That same year, Barack Obama reportedly swapped his BlackBerry for a Samsung S4.
Then, finally, this year, they said, "Good news, Mr. President, we're going to give you a smartphone."
But apparently, he didn't like it so much for security reasons.
And they're all like, "Well, Mr. President, for security reasons, there's a great phone, state-of-the-art, but it doesn't take pictures. You can't text. The phone doesn't work. You can't play your music on it." So basically, it's like, does your 3-year-old have one of those play phones?
That laugh doesn't get annoying at all. And speaking of annoying, Kim Kardashian mourned the death of her favorite phone. In January 2022, the company permanently shut down BlackBerry Email, BlackBerry Messenger, and other services necessary for the operation of most of its devices, reinforcing the end of the journey for one of the greatest cell phone manufacturers of all time. But is there still a chance for us to witness a triumphant return of the brand? When it discontinued several of its services in January 2022, BlackBerry definitely ended the device that named the brand. The phones are still sold, but they are far from being the revolution we knew in the early 2000s. This happened because after several failed attempts to make a cell phone model successful again, BlackBerry saw no way out. Charles Egan, who was the company's global head of device software at the time, admitted they were truly disappointed with the poor market performance of the devices. But despite the frustration in the smartphone market, BlackBerry still had one very important thing in its favor. It was still recognized as a benchmark in security. Hacking a device from the brand was extremely difficult. Because of this, the company had a privileged position in sensitive and highly regulated sectors, such as the government itself. Today, BlackBerry works with corporate security solutions and operating systems for cars. The new BlackBerry is focused on conquering large companies, no longer the average consumer like you and me. Back to the roots. According to the company's website, securing a connected future you can trust. BlackBerry helps organizations defend against cyber threats. BlackBerry is now a leader in cybersecurity, helping businesses, government agencies, and critical security institutions of all sizes protect the Internet of Things. Anyway, the most exciting thing about BlackBerry today is car technologies, so it is unlikely that you will hear someone talk about the company in the consumer market, if not nostalgically. What do you think of BlackBerry's fate? Did the iPhone really was the main problem for them? Comment below. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is no stranger to scandals and shockingly unethical decisions. And yet, Big Pharma seems to get away with some of the worst practices in the market. But why is that exactly? To know more about it, click on the video that's on screen right now and I'll see you there. That's it for this video. Bye bye.